Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me for the Michigan Guided Pathways Institute webinar, recapping Institute 3 from last November. Could I ask everyone to, or someone to pop into the chat box and let me know that you can hear me? No one is responding. Okay, I see. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Okay. Oh, I'm seeing hands raised. Good. Good. I also see that that must mean that you also, oh, thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. Great. Okay, good. Then we'll get started with this webinar. Um, uh, the purpose of this webinar is to allow people who did not attend our Mentor Circle Institute on the 29th of November to kind of catch up with what we've been talking about and address any questions that you might have. But I wanted to kind of hit the highlights and also let you know where you can find more information. So let's get started. We're going to talk about why we would support financial stability. What are some practices that strengthen financial stability for students, and how you can make financial stability part of students' guided pathways. So I wanted to start this out by talking a little bit about Ismail Chamu. This is a student that you might recognize as someone that you might meet on one of your campuses, although he attends UC Berkeley and was featured in a Los Angeles Times article last March. He constantly scrambles to find shelter and enough food for himself while working a campus job, leading a student club, and trying to earn a bachelor's degree in sociology. That is a stunning number of our students in community colleges. And for a more specific Michigan-related example, I'd like to introduce you to Alice. Alice is a hardworking member of your community in Michigan. Alice is employed but doesn't earn enough to afford the basic necessities of life. Alice stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And Alice is a term that was coined by the United Way Association, who produces this report. It's available in a number of states. Michigan is one of the participants in the Alice report. So Alice cuts your hair. Alice provides childcare for you or your neighbors. Alice works at the convenience store where you may shop. Alice might mow your lawn. Alice might do any number of jobs that keep a person employed, but do not necessarily give them access to what we might consider to be all of the necessities of daily living. 40% of Michigan households live below the Alice threshold. And a lot of them are our students in community colleges. Here's a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And calling attention to that bottom purple section of the pyramid, the physiological needs: food, water, warmth, and rest, and then security and safety. If a student cannot be certain of those bottom two strands of need being met, they're going to have a lot more difficulty feeling attached to their learning process, understanding the importance of their education, achieving their full potential at the top with self-actualization. So thinking about people who are going through their lives not having those needs met and trying at the same time to be a successful student is kind of staggering. And it's certainly something that we're looking at in our colleges every day. So the Lumina Foundation and some of the other professionals working in the field have identified 4 specific strategies to strengthen student financial stability that we can take a look at. And one of them is, the first one and perhaps the most important, is to understand what the needs are on your campus. What do you know about your students? Second, to then organize and connect supports. You're probably already providing a large number of supports to your students on campus. They're being provided in different offices. They're being provided by different people. They're being provided by referrals to external partners. They may be being provided informally by people keeping a box of power bars on their desk, or by someone who hands out literature information to connect people with food pantries or other services in the community. So to strengthen the student financial stability, you're going to organize and connect those supports. Third, we work on connecting partner supports to the students. So when you are working with an external partner who's providing information support, various kinds of of support to students, we need to make sure that students have access to those supports and that we are deliberately connecting the supports to students. And finally, ensuring that students are accessing those supports. And one of the things that one of our presenters mentioned at the meeting on the 29th that really stuck with me is what we're trying to do here is structure luck. We all know stories of students who just by chance came across our door or one of our colleagues, and you found out that that student was homeless, and you were able to connect him or her with a source of support, or you were able to direct them to get a loan. And a lot of times those things kind of happen by happenstance. So what the idea of providing a real program of strengthening student financial stability is to kind of structure that luck and happenstance so that it happens all the time to all the students that need it. So here I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into a few of the strategies. First one is to understand students' need. And how do we find out? That's not something that we typically know from our applications, but what kind of data can you gather to try to understand what students might need? One strategy to look at this is when they fill out the FAFSA, there's an unmet financial need area. So if there's a gap between what the student is being offered from financial aid to what the student's need is, that's a way for you to see that that student is, has some needs that are not being met. How many hours a week does the student work? Are they the primary caretaker for any dependents? Are they the first in their family to attend college? That's a piece of information that sometimes we're gathering on our applications. There's some existing sources that you can use as proxies. There are also strategies that people are using that I'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about connecting students to supports, with a deliberate intake process where students are asked some of these questions and are able to provide some of this information as part of the registration process or the intake processes that we use to bring onboard students into the college. So think about how can you develop a process to understand student needs. Second is organizing and connecting supports, and this is also termed bundling. So how do you bundle these supports so that more of them are provided at the same time in the same place, so that students understand kind of the breadth of what's available? How can you use your onboarding? I mentioned on an intake form, an orientation. What kind of bundling can you do at that initial advising appointment? How can we use that as an opportunity to connect some of these supports and help students see what might be available with the advisors, with counselors, with financial aid. Some colleges are working on a student services syllabus, which is presented to students at advising appointments, and that basically, like a course syllabus, a student services syllabus lays out what the student can expect from the college in terms of support and how they can access those supports. So it's, much like a course has objectives and ways to meet those objectives, the student services syllabus would lay out the college's objectives to serve students and where those services are provided, where that student should look for information about those services. Another thing that some colleges are using that I thought was interesting, you could provide this also on the syllabus for every course. There's some information that could be provided to all students just as part of the course syllabus. Or hand out a cheat sheet in class to students if you're a faculty member with information about the services that are available on campus or off campus or by referral. And then one of the things that I thought was really interesting was this idea of asking faculty every week. The Student Services Office sends all the faculty a PowerPoint slide with all of the things that might be available to the students. So if you have tax preparation help coming on campus that week, or if you have a food drive going on, or if you have some other kind of service or event going on, like the most important things for all students to know, and you put them on one slide, and all the faculty member has to do is pop that slide up at the beginning of class, as the students are coming in or as they're leaving, so that those announcements, it's kind of along the same lines. Many of people use those Stall Street journals and other kind of restroom signs. But this is a way to do it in the classroom and to reach students in the classroom where we know that they're going to be allowing them to see this information, weekly, and it changes weekly. So just something to consider. If you have a food pantry, and more people do, how are you using that food pantry to also advertise other services that students can access? Are there campus workshops on, finding a job or preparing your taxes or other kinds of supports that you also could use as an opportunity to let students know about services? So think about, a hub. Are you bringing in any external partners that you're co-locating on your campus? And then every member of the college personnel can and should become a bundler of themselves. So how can you help your campus understand the things that are being offered so that they can become a resource for students? You'll see that there are not a lot of answers in this work right now, but there are a lot of ideas and strong suggestions, and also a lot of opportunity for creativity in terms of how you can bundle these services, how you can provide these services. Another thing is how can you creatively use external partners to provide some of these things that you don't provide? And so think about your definition of partnership. Think about who has some built-in expertise or some ready-to-use tools. And one thing that we are talking about, and we were fortunate to have Nancy Lindeman from the Michigan Association of United Ways at our meeting in November to talk about the new My Bridges program. My Bridges is a program that it's a portal that students can use, or anyone can use, to register and see what kind of services they are eligible for, whether it's home heating assistance, SNAP, food stamps, various other benefits. Well, public benefits that students might be eligible for. So I'm going to show you a quick video about My Bridges. I hope I'm going to show you a quick video about My Bridges. Let's see. Looking good.
Michigan is committed to its people, its communities, and its families. So when the people of Michigan struggle, the entire foundation of our great state suffers. And that's not the Michigan way. We stand up for each other. We care for one another. And we understand that when life throws us a curveball, it's during these times we need help the most. This is why MDHHS is launching the all-new My Bridges. In partnership with Michigan 211, My Bridges transforms the way Michigan residents interact with MDHHS. It's no longer just a tool, but also an avenue to connect Michigan residents to local programs available in their community. You can now find a job or apply for health benefits directly through local agencies, filing required documents instantly before your needs become dire. We understand that access to basic needs like electricity and medical transportation are critical to leading a healthy and productive life. So we've streamlined My Bridges across all platforms, allowing you easy access to resources wherever you're located. All you have to do is answer a few simple questions, and a list of nearby state and local agencies are at your fingertips. Send a contact request directly within My Bridges, and a community partner can get you started on the path towards self-sufficiency. And you can still view case details and benefit information, so you're always in the loop. In times of trouble, nothing is more empowering than a friendly smile and a helping hand. After all, our communities are only as strong as the people living within them. Thanks to the all-new My Bridges, you can have peace of mind, knowing help is there every step of the way.
Okay, I think that okay, I'm pretty sure that you could not see that video. Hopefully you were able to hear it. I apologize. This is you're into my technology trough here. I thought I was much smarter than I obviously am about running a webinar. So oops, let's go back. But I wanted to call attention to the My Bridges site because one of the things that we will be talking more about, and we will talk more with you about how you can get more involved with My Bridges. There are a couple of different ways to get involved, and the very there's some really low touch, low tech ways to get involved, which would be good for me because I'm obviously not very technologically savvy and couldn't make a video play out of my PowerPoint. But you can be involved as a referral partner on My Bridges. You can, United Way provides training for your staff to help students, and you can become a navigation partner where you actually can help students work through the program. You can also be a resource listed on My Bridges for students who need education or various kinds of training or assistance. If you, again, with the food pantry, if you have a food pantry, you can be listed as a food pantry resource. It's something to look into, and you will be hearing more about My Bridges from us. So consider support that's both low touch and high touch, and think about how you can bring the service to the student. So something you could be as technology oriented and comprehensive as something like My Bridges, or it can be someone who comes in once a week to provide some kinds of services. It can be a project, for example, like the some of you might have seen at the Student Success Summit at Mott Community College presented their Help Portrait service project, where they do a project and they take family portraits of students. They invite the community in. The students collaborate on the, that's like a single project support. Or you can have somebody from a mental health service come in on a semi-permanent periodic basis so that you have people available, if a counselor available on site or a resource person available on site, to connect those partner supports to students. Finally, you need to think about how you're going to connect, how you're going to make sure that the students use the supports. Once you have built this system, how do you get students to overcome the stigma of walking into the food pantry? How do you get information about what needs students have? And here they have colleges who have done various things. The opt-out versus opt-in at LaGuardia Community College, they have every student fill out a questionnaire when they register that asks them about their needs for these basic services that the college will provide for them. So every student does it. Every student fills it out. It's not just, hey, you look a little like you might be homeless or hungry. Would you like to fill out this form to let me know what services you might need? But they just ask all the students, so they normalize it. The food people are putting their food pantries in a place where there's the ability to have it to not be a stigmatized experience to walk in, or just making it very public and front and center and encouraging all people to kind of hang out in that area and using it as a hub of activity on campus. So how can you normalize your services for and do a better job of making sure that students use them? Use students as co-designers. I was actually just reading a very recent article or piece on NPR. I guess I was reading it, listening to it from NPR about rural students at the University of Michigan and how the university is using kind of a peer mentoring process to connect rural students to each other. Students, who come from a very small town, very small high school. We don't always think about these students as being high need students, but they're culturally adrift, perhaps, at your institution. Now that's kind of an example of an elite university where students are changing environments. But some of our colleges do draw students from both, from urban, suburban, rural areas. And have you given thought to how you can use students as peer mentors to help connect each other to the services and help integrate them better into the college? And then finally, in terms of connecting and making sure that students access services, there's going to be a professional development piece for your staff. How are you going to provide that development? How are you going to make sure that your personnel, faculty, staff, not just frontline student services staff, but classroom teachers, classroom instructors, maintenance supervisors, bookstore employees, everyone needs to understand more about what the college has in place to support students who are experiencing a need, because you never know who the person is that the student is going to turn to and kind of reveal that need. And if the person that they decide to open up to says, well, I just really have no idea, then it's a lost opportunity. So what's your professional development to make sure that everyone knows what's available and how to connect students who might have needs to services that you have available? I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions before I go on into how these practices fit into your guided pathways. You can use either the chat or the question box if you have a question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this point. So I'm going to go on to talking about how you can fit financial stability practices into your guided pathways plan. So starting with clarifying students' paths or mapping pathways to students' end goals. Within the information that you're sharing with students about the program that they're entering and the labor market outcomes of the program and the courses that they're going to need to take, consider making sure that your materials communicate clearly what the full cost of attendance is at the college, what hopefully how hopefully they will benefit economically by finishing their degree or their award, their certificate, and what is available to help pay for college beyond just what the product of the FAFSA is, which is, what is your Pell Grant? What is your loan eligibility? Are there other things, are there other opportunities available? Are there scholarships available that the student might need to know about? And I would just put in a plug here too, to say, look at your scholarships. Many of you have foundations. Many of you have scholarships. Many of you have scholarships that are never awarded because they're for, students with red hair who want to go into veterinary technology. Is there a way to think about how you can make those scholarships, those funds, more available to students who may really appreciate the boost of a few $100 extra to help them get through? Think about, and how do you market scholarships to students who have already enrolled and who are getting closer to completion and need some help to get over the finish line. So that's as you're thinking about clarifying their pathway, think about paying for their pathway as well. Second bucket of guided pathways, helping students get on a path. And this is where you can use your screening process to determine supports and benefits, including public benefits, for which the student might be available. So consider normalizing a process where you make sure that students are aware of all the options that are open to them, and also where you try to find out what their needs might be so you can better connect them to those bundled services. It's an additional process perhaps to build into your intake, but it's also a huge opportunity because you've got that student there, you and the student. If you're the advisor, the person advising the student, whether you're a faculty member or a navigator or whatever however you are using that initial appointment, you are there with the student. You are talking about their pathway. You are talking about their plan. And it's an opportunity to find out what obstacles they might face in executing this plan. So if, as you lay out, here's the courses that you need to take, there might be a process to find out if the student is going to have some transportation needs, if the student is going to have some childcare needs that's going to make it more challenging for them to pursue this plan. And how can you connect them with benefits at that point or services? Keeping students on the path. And this is, again, with that professional development piece for your staff, for your college personnel. How are you going to make sure that everyone understands what services are offered. And something interesting that came up at the meeting that we were in is, as you're designing these intake forms and kind of executing these plans, think about, and connecting your services. If you put something on your intake form and ask them if they're going to need help with it, you better have a service in place to help them with it. So if you ask them if they're going to need help with transportation, and then you're just collecting that information to find that you have, 20% of your students are concerned that their transportation is not reliable, but you don't have any public transportation or you don't have any resources to direct them to, it's kind of a false advertising. You're basically, if you're going to ask them if they need help, you better have help ready for them. So think about that as you're designing the intake form. If you don't have an assistance plan, maybe don't ask the students if they need help with it. But keeping students on the path is a lot about the professional development of your staff and making sure that everyone is able to direct those students to where they can receive assistance. Finally, ensuring students are learning. Mastering these adulting activities, pursuing financial stability, managing finances, managing resources, these are all active learning activities. And we are, as an institution, should take our education responsibility seriously in terms of helping the students and embedding the principles of learning into all of our interactions. So we're not just handing students a piece of paper and saying, here's some ideas for resources, but we're actually using that opportunity to help the student manage and cope and improve their ability to handle and overcome those obstacles. So think about that in terms of what kinds of interactions you're designing between your staff and students. Does anybody have any questions about how you would embed financial stability into guided pathways? I'm hoping that these examples will help you see that this is really not something separate. Although it is a kind of a separate planning bucket, it isn't separate from guided pathways. It is part of, you having a student have a financially sound, foundation underfoot as they travel their pathway is really an important part of guided pathways. Okay. As part of this kind of unveiling this emphasis to help colleges support students' financial stability, our partners at National Center for Inquiry and Improvement have developed a scale of adoption for financial stability practices. And I'm going to show you at the end of this webinar where you can find this, but basically it's going to walk through each of the practices that I talked about, each of the practice areas with some sample practices, and allow you to assess your current levels of support. So, and you can see that it uses the familiar scale, not occurring, not systematic, planning to scale, scaling in progress that we've used for guided pathways in general. So it's kind of a similar tool, and it will allow you to look at each of the at sample practices for financial stability, which we've kind of talked through in that FS1, FS2 section, and rate yourself to see where you are with those practices. And it's a self-assessment tool. It will help see where you are. It will help you kind of focus on where you're going. one of the things that it also includes is an inventory of your current services. So look at all, on this list of things that you might provide. You might have housing on campus. You might have a food pantry. You might have transportation assistance. Students can be connected with home heating tax credits or home heating credits. Do you have a financial literacy course or website or some sort of support that students can go through? Financial products. Do you assist students in opening bank accounts? Do you have retention or completion grants? Can students get emergency grants or loans? Assistance with textbooks. Open educational resources is another piece of this financial stability work in allowing students to complete their degree, complete their courses with low or no cost textbooks. Do you have that available? Do you have mental health assistance? And you'll see on the inventory, it will ask you 2 questions. One is this a critical need? Is this in the top 3 to 5 areas of need that you understand that your students have? And then, is it provided by the college or by an external partner? Or is it not, is there currently no plan to provide this? And that's where it kind of goes to this idea that as you're designing your questions for students, think about matching the questions for students to the things that you have available. And if you have critical needs that are not being provided for, there's opportunities there for creativity, for partnering with an external agency. Seeing, there's just so many. I keep saying creativity because I was just struck by the idea that there are so many ways that we can creatively support our students that, and I know that those are already going on many of your campuses, and this is just an opportunity to spark more of those creative ideas. I see a question. Oh, I'm the only one running the webinar. I am Rhonda today because Rhonda has to be there for us to have a webinar. So this is Jenny. I'm viewing the comments. Let's see. Are there more? Any other questions? Okay. Let me see. Okay. Hang on. JT, I see your question. I'm trying to figure out how, here we go, how I can see the whole thing here. Yes. Okay. Any other questions at this time? So to kind of conclude, some real talk, some things to think about when you are starting to have these discussions on your campus. One is, how can the food pantry be a starting point and not an ending point in this work? A lot of colleges who are undertaking this work, the first thing that they do is they start a food pantry, and that's a fantastic idea. But how can we then use the food pantry in more creative ways to expand the work and not just limit ourselves to giving out shelf-stable food products? How are our own policies and processes having unintended consequence on the students? How are we, on maybe some student groups? Oops, I've popped out of. All right, what happened? No. Okay. Having unintended consequences on some groups of students. And so if we're some, like, for example, okay, so here's an example that is not necessarily related to a college, but think about the times that you are scheduling what classes. In terms of, well, and this can apply to a college as well. So if you know that many students who are parents are taking courses in a certain program, are you scheduling those courses to start after, to take place while those kids are in school, so that they can come to class, or is, for some reason, all of the classes for that program scheduled at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is one of the more difficult times for young parents to take courses. There are other examples of ways that our own processes, the own way that we organize ourselves as a college, can get in the way of particular groups being successful. So think about your policies and how you might be tripping your students up on your own work. How do we normalize the student experience? How do we help the student feel like, even if they are experiencing some of these basic needs issues, that they belong, that they can overcome these obstacles, that we are here to support and help them? And how do we communicate that to the student? How do we align and offer the relevant professional development for staff? And finally, how do we meaningfully engage all of the campus community? And I wanted to take a moment here and ask if anybody wants to share an example from their own campus. I know we've got some people on here who are doing some of these things on campus. If you let me know, let's see, I'm gonna, if you put something in the question box, I'll unmute you. And then you can share if you would like to. Anybody have anything they would like to share? I see people with raised hands, but I don't know if that was from being able to hear me. So please type in the question box if you would like to speak. Okay. Well, it is late in the afternoon on a Thursday afternoon, and it sounds like, or it appears like, no one really wants to share at this time. So I'm going to go on and just talk to you about where you can find more resources on this topic. All right. So first of all, I want you to know all the presentations from the Mentor Circle Institute are available on mcca.org on our Guided Pathways Resource Repository page. And this PowerPoint will also be available there. So anything that, came up from here, but there's also a much more full PowerPoint that was presented during the day then. These are some resources that Priya from the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement shared with us. They're all hyperlinked. I will also have a recording of this webinar available. And I want to finally, if there are no questions, I want to thank Priya Chaplot from the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement and Nancy Lindman from the Michigan Association of United Ways, who provided great content at these meetings and will continue to be resources for us as we move forward. One of the things that you will find if you go to the mcca.org page is you will see the Financial Stability Practices Scale of Adoption Assessment, and you can download that there as a Word document so you can fill it out. Again, this is not something that we're asking anyone to fill out. We want to make that available to you as a planning tool. But I want to encourage you to go to the Guided Pathways Resource Repository. It's right at the top of the page, mcca.org, Center for Student Success, Guided Pathways Resource Repository. Are there any final questions or any way that anything that I can help you this afternoon? I am not seeing anyone typing. Just double check. I see that. Okay, I do see a question from JT. First of all, a comment that they have established a financial stability committee, and then a question about whether we might have an opportunity to hear about what other schools are doing at a later date. Let me unmute you, JT. Hang on just a second, because I want to ask you if you're talking about schools in Michigan or click to unmute. Are you talking about schools in Michigan or other schools in the country, JT? Okay, I don't think he hears me. All right. We will make information available and examples available if we can about how schools are using these strategies, and Priya will share with us more as they start implementing, and we'll be following up with some of you when we do the scale of adoption assessment in some of our Mentor Circle colleges, where we can talk about what you are doing. So hopefully more on this in the future. And I really appreciate all of your time this afternoon to hear about this webinar. And I will make the recording will be available, and the slides will be available on mcca.org. And that being said, I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you.